I took an old junk car and reworked it for my home layout, adding and upgrading parts, and doing some paint touch-up and weathering. The car body on this isn't terrible, and there is a fair amount of hydro cushion detail on the frame. Grading it from a toy to a reliable model requires replacing the trucks and couplers and adding a few details. The push-in style trucks with Talgo body-mounted X2F horn hook couplers was a recipe for a wreck. This arrangement was the curse of beginners' sets which caused so much frustration. Most beginners simply went on to other hobbies. The whole arrangement will be replaced. Here are the parts I used to make the car a reliable roller and improve the appearance. Tichy roller bearing trucks, KD 33-inch metal wheel sets, KD number 5 couplers, KD draft gearboxes from number 148 couplers, A-line type B-steps and scrap styrene cutoffs. The resulting hole for the original push-in clip-style truck can be filled, but I prefer a fresh start entirely. Later we will replace the crude stirrups with formed wire scale replacements, along with the oversized brake wheel, using a KD modern type scale version. Typical of older train set quality products, the car number matches a 50-foot double-plug door version. I believe they could have applied the paint to a more accurate car they produced. Instead they chose to create a fantasy car. An interesting note, but I will leave that alone for the sake of this project. I used a scrap cutoff that was floating around on the workbench to create a flat bolster to cover the hole. If memory serves, this is from a plain sheet of 0.30-inch thick styrene. While a basic square would do, I contoured it into a shape which somewhat fit the underframe. I bonded this piece to the styrene underframe with Plastruct plastic weld. While the bonding agent set and dried, I used a micro mark truck tuner to cut the proper 60-degree angle into the wheel journals. If you are unfamiliar with a truck tuner, it is a game changer to create free-rolling trucks, reducing drag and noise. I used a cheap nail file abrasive stick to remove the lip and create a flat surface for the new bolster. I drilled the hole of a 256 screw. Rather than becoming obsessed with measuring for placement, I turned the underframe over and just drilled in the center of the old opening. I used a pair of sprue cutters to snip off the cast on stirrups, these are often missing on second-hand cars anyway, then eliminated any leftover bulges with a sanding stick. I drilled the holes for the A-line stirrups using a number 70 bit in a pin vise. I don't measure this out. If the ladder dimensions are close to correct, the stirrup is directly below the corners of the ladder, as low as possible on the sill. Close counts, and the stirrup can be tweaked a bit to fit. The difference between the original toy-like brake wheel and the scale KD is clear. I bent the ends of the A-line stirrups to fit into the holes I drilled and used gel CA, superglue, to secure them. I like the gel because it fills any gaps from drilling. Typically, train set cars are severely underweight, so I pulled a second steel weight from another similar junk car. I used CA to attach it, but to assure it wouldn't come loose and rattle around inside, I used some more scrap styrene to build a cradle. This piece would supply a portion of that cradle. This didn't have to look good, so I cut and bonded short lengths of square solid tube pieces to each end of the weights, then bonded some rectangle bits to wedge the weights so even if the CA failed between the weights, they would remain in place. I added the other rectangle pieces to prevent them moving to the side as well. Here is the car with new parts in place. The next after paint is touched up. While I was at it, I painted the end crossover platforms silver. On the prototype car, these are stamped galvanized sheet metal mounted as breakaway parts, which can be quickly replaced if damage occurs. I added streaks to the roof to pre-weather ahead of powder weathering. I initially mounted KD number 5 couplers in number 148 draft gearboxes. I prefer the draft gearboxes that come with whisker-style couplers. These were some common parts I had in my parts box, and drilling for a 256 mounting screw didn't get documented as planned. Later, I decided to use a Walther's simulated cushion box provided as a sample from a friend, John Hecker. I drilled the flat mounting portion and secured it to the underframe as pictured. To beef up the arrangement, I added a pair of styrene strips to both extend the car's frame and for added structural integrity and appearance. I don't make a practice of painting the underframes of freight cars, but since I modified it with white styrene parts, I decided to mix up a rusty, dirty color I usually use to paint wheels and trucks. I use cheap apple barrel paint, in this case orange with a bit of burnt umber. There is nothing scientific here, I just add the burnt umber until I get the shade I'm after. Once that dried, I watered down some apple barrel pavement as a wash. This picture shows the paint still wet in places, and the modifications to adapt to the Tichy trucks and KD couplers. The final shots are after the application of Dave's weathering powders. I'll try to submit a piece on this subject later on.